My name was Magos Biologus Hadron Vex, and I have been screaming for 372 years. Not with my voice, that was consumed in the 3rd decade. Not with my lungs, those were dissolved and absorbed in your 47. I scream with every neuron that remains firing in what used to be my brain, now threaded through with chitinous filaments that pulse with alien thought patterns. I scream with the knowledge that I feel everything, process everything, understand everything, and that this understanding has become my purpose. The hive mind taught me this. It taught me by example. Let me explain how I learned what true biological perfection means. Let me tell you about the day I stopped being human and became data. Living, screaming, eternal data encoded in Tyranid synaptic tissue. But first, I must take you back to when I still had hands, back to when I believed the Omnissiah would protect those who sought knowledge in his name. Back to when I thought I was the one performing the vivisection. I was wrong about everything. I was 43 years old when they brought me the specimen. 43 standard Terran years of life, 31 of which had been dedicated to the Adeptus Mechanicus. My birth name was Hadron Vex, given to me by my father on the forge world of Griffin IV, before the Tyranids came and devoured everything. Him, my 2 brothers, the Manufactorum, where he'd worked for 60 years, the Hab unit where I'd learned to read from his collection of forbidden pre-imperial technical manuals. But that was later. On the day the specimen arrived, Griffon the 4th still existed, and I was stationed aboard the research vessel Immutable Inquiry, a Mechanicus exploratory ship tasked with studying xenoforms encountered at the edges of imperial space. I remember the specific moment with perfect clarity. Not because of my augmented memory coils, which I had not yet received, but because it was the last day I felt genuine excitement rather than the cold drive for data that would later consume me. The specimen chamber's doors cycled open with a pneumatic hiss that smelled of recycled air and the acidic tang of chemical preservatives. I stood in my crimson robes, still mostly flesh then, both my original hands intact, my face unmodified except for the standard cranial interface ports, my legs my own. I could still taste the reclaimed protein paste I'd eaten that morning. I could still feel the slight ache in my lower back from hunching over examination tables. I was human, augmented, yes, indoctrinated into the machine cult, certainly, but human in all the ways that mattered. Magos Vex, the servitor's voxcaster crackled, its monotone cutting through my anticipation. The servitor itself was a grotesque thing, a former criminal whose cerebral cortex had been scooped out and replaced with simple command protocols, his body now more machine than man, kept alive by chemical infusions and mindless electrical stimulation. Specimen delivery, classification, Tyranid bioform, subspecies, Tyrannicus primus warrior strain, status, subdued, but metabolically active. The servitor wheeled in the containment apparatus, a massive crystalline cylinder filled with stasis gel, crackling with suppression fields that cast flickering blue light across the examination chamber. And there, suspended in the translucent medium, was the creature. It was magnificent. No, that's the wrong word. It was efficient. Terrifyingly, beautifully efficient. The Tyranid warrior measured approximately 3 meters in length, its body a masterwork of biological engineering that made our Mechanicus augmentations look like crude clockwork by comparison. Its exoskeleton was a deep purple-black segmented plates that overlapped with mathematical precision. 4 arms, 2 massive scything talons that looked capable of bisecting a space marine, and 2 smaller manipulator limbs with opposable digits. The head was elongated, almost serpentine, with a crest of chitinous blades. No eyes, just smooth chitin where eyes should be, because it didn't hunt by sight. It hunted by sensing bioelectric fields, by tasting pheromone trails in the air, by feeling the vibrations of prey through specialized organs I could only guess at. I approached the containment cylinder slowly, my heart rate increasing. I noticed it tick upward on my internal biometric display from 68 to 83 beats per minute. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from anticipation. "How was it captured?" I asked the deck officer, a junior Magos named Suleiman Rowe, who stood by the chamber's entrance. Suleiman was younger than me by a decade, ambitious, his body already half replaced with augmetics in his rush to ascend the Mechanicus hierarchy. "Kill team from the Death Watch," Suleiman replied, consulting a data slate. "Encountered a splinter fleet tendril in the Orpheus sector. This one was separated from the swarm by artillery bombardment. They used neural disruptors to subdue it before the fleet's synapse network could trigger its self-destruct biology. 17 Astartes died capturing this single specimen. It killed 12 of them directly. The other 5 died from toxin exposure after the battle. 17 of the Emperor's finest warriors. That's what the propaganda would call them. 17 genetically enhanced super soldiers bred for war, dead to capture 1 Tyranid. The mathematics of that exchange haunted me even then. "Has it been conscious during transport?" I asked. The tech priests aboard the transport vessel reported unusual neural activity, Suleiman said, his mechadendrites twitching with what might have been nervousness. The suppression fields should keep it comatose, but the brain activity never ceased. It's been generating continuous synaptic pulses for the entire 6-week transit. We don't know what that means. I stepped closer to the cylinder until my breath fogged the crystal. The creature didn't move. The stasis gel and neural suppressors ensured that. But I swear I felt something, not movement, something else. A presence, a pressure against my mind, like standing too close to a voxcaster turned to a frequency just beyond hearing. "Magos Vex," Suleiman said, his voice edged with concern. The Fabricator General's orders were explicit. Full biological analysis, every organ system documented, every neural pathway mapped, every genetic sequence decoded. He believes understanding Tyranid biology is key to developing more effective weapons against the hive fleets. "I understand my orders," I said, not looking away from the creature. What I didn't say, what I barely admitted to myself, was that I didn't care about weapons. I cared about understanding. The Imperium called the Tyranids a threat, a plague, an abomination. But I saw them as the universe's answer to a question I'd been asking my entire career. What is the theoretical limit of biological optimization? The Mechanicus taught that flesh was weak, that the path to perfection was through the replacement of fallible biology with sacred machinery. We replaced our limbs with mechadendrites, our organs with cybernetics, our thoughts with cogitator-assisted processing. We believed, as I had been conditioned to believe, that the Omnissiah, the machine god, represented the pinnacle of existence. But looking at that Tyranid, I felt the first crack in my indoctrination. What if flesh wasn't weak? What if we simply hadn't seen flesh pushed to its ultimate expression? "Begin preparation for vivisection," I ordered. "Full sterile protocol. I want redundant life support standing by. The objective is to keep the specimen alive and conscious during the entire procedure." Suleiman's optical implant whirred as it focused on me. "Alive? Magos, the creatures are non-sentient. They feel no pain as we understand it. There's no scientific benefit to maintaining consciousness during—" "The Imperial Tactica claims they're non-sentient," I interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. "But we don't actually know that. Every battlefield report describes them adapting, learning, evolving in real time. That requires some form of consciousness, however alien. If I'm going to understand how their biology functions, I need to observe it functioning under stress. Pain is stress. Consciousness processes stress. Therefore, I need it conscious and in pain." I spoke those words so clinically, so rationally. I believed I was being scientific. I didn't realize I was describing my own future. The next 72 hours were consumed with preparation. The Immutable Inquiry's primary biological research theater was a cathedral to the pursuit of knowledge. 30 meters across, its walls lined with specimen containment units, vivisection tables equipped with neural probes and molecular scanners, banks of cogitators ready to record every data point. I supervised the installation of specialized equipment personally. A hyper-oxygenated atmosphere to prevent tissue death during prolonged examination. Nutrient feeders capable of delivering custom chemical compounds directly into the specimen's circulatory system. Molecular stabilizers to prevent cellular decay. And most importantly, neural stimulators, devices designed to keep the creature's nervous system active even as I dismantled its body. The Mechanicus had developed these tools for servitor conversion, to keep criminals' brains functioning during the process of lobotomization and augmentation. We were, after all, experts in the modification of living flesh. We told ourselves it was sacred work. The Omnissiah's will made manifest. Now I would use those same tools on something that had never heard of the Omnissiah, something that served a different god entirely, though I didn't understand that yet. On the third day, we moved the specimen from its stasis cylinder to the examination table. It took 6 servitors and a specialized suspensor harness to maneuver the creature's bulk. Even unconscious, it was terrifying. Each limb was corded with muscle analog tissue that flexed reflexively when touched. Each talon was razor-sharp enough to scratch the adamantium table. I ran preliminary scans while it remained sedated. The data was staggering. Its skeleton wasn't bone. It was a composite of calcium compounds and silicate matrices that provided structural strength exceeding reinforced ceramite. Its musculature operated on a completely alien principle, using chemical cascade reactions that generated force, magnitudes impossible for standard muscle tissue. Its circulatory system pumped not blood, but a complex fluid that served simultaneously as oxygen carrier, immune response, and neural conduction medium. But the brain. The brain was what fascinated me most. It was massive. Nearly a quarter of the creature's total body mass was dedicated to neural tissue, but it wasn't centralized. The Tyranid had neural clusters throughout its entire body, creating a distributed nervous system with redundancies upon redundancies. You could destroy half its brain and it would continue fighting with barely diminished capacity. Remarkable, I breathed, studying the neural scan data. It's not just redundant, it's anti-fragile. The more damage it sustains, the more neural pathways activate to compensate. It doesn't just survive trauma, it's optimized for trauma. Suleiman Rowe stood beside me, his mechadendrites interfacing with the examination theater's cogitators, recording everything. The Death Watch reports support that. They say Tyranids become more dangerous when wounded, more aggressive, more effective. Not aggression, I corrected, my mind racing through the implications. Purpose. Look at these neurochemical readings. When the tissue is damaged, it releases compounds that enhance neuroplasticity and accelerate decision-making processes. Pain, or what we would call pain, triggers a cascade that makes it better at fighting. Its biology has weaponized suffering. I should have recognized the warning in those words. I should have understood what I was seeing, but I was too excited, too focused on the data, too convinced of my own superiority as the observer, the scientist, the one in control. "Begin the wakening process," I ordered. "Reduce neural suppression in stages. I want it fully conscious in 30 minutes. The servitors moved with mechanical precision, adjusting the chemical feed lines, dialing back the suppression fields. I watched the biometric displays as the creature's metabolism began to accelerate. Heart rate, or what served as a heart, increasing from 12 beats per minute to 40, then 80, then 120. Neural activity spiking across all its distributed brain clusters. At minute 23, its primary eyes, the ones I hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath translucent protective membranes, snapped open. They were black, completely black. No iris, no pupil, just dark pools that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And they were looking directly at me. I felt it then, that pressure again, but stronger. Not a voice, not a thought, something deeper, like standing at the edge of an ocean and feeling the pull of the tide, knowing that beneath the surface was something vast and hungry and utterly inhuman. Neural activity at 300% of predicted baseline, Suleiman reported, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. "Magos, this doesn't match any xenoform readings in the Mechanicus archives. Its brain is... I don't know how to describe it. It's not processing like an animal. The pattern is too complex, too organized." "Because it's not an animal," I said quietly, unable to look away from those black eyes. "It's a weapon, a thinking weapon. Begin vivisection protocol." The examination table's restraint fields intensified, locking the Tyranid's limbs in position. I selected my first instrument, a molecular scalpel capable of cutting through the creature's armored hide. My hand was steady. My heart rate was elevated but controlled at 96 beats per minute. I positioned the scalpel against the creature's thorax, where the preliminary scans had indicated the location of its primary circulatory organ. "Initiating first incision," I announced for the record. "Cutting through dorsal carapace to access internal organ systems." The scalpel touched chitin. There was resistance, more than I'd expected, even with molecular edge-cutting tools. I applied pressure. The blade sank slowly through the armor plating with a sound like tearing leather, and the creature screamed. Not with its mouth, through its entire body. Every distributed neural cluster fired simultaneously, generating a pulse of bioelectric energy so intense that my augmented neural ports registered it as physical pain. The cogitators shrieked with electromagnetic interference. Two of the servitors collapsed, their basic neural programming overloaded by the psychic backwash. I staggered backward, the scalpel falling from my hand, both palms pressed against my temples as agony lanced through my skull. "What was that?" Suleiman gasped, his own neural implants smoking slightly. "Magos, what in the Omnissiah's name was that?" But I already knew, even as my vision cleared and I stared at the creature still locked on the examination table, its black eyes fixed on me with what I could only describe as interest. It hadn't screamed in pain. It had communicated. It had reached out through the immaterium, through whatever medium the Tyranids used to coordinate across light years, and it had touched our minds deliberately. It was telling me something. It was telling me, I feel everything, and I am perfect. I picked up the scalpel with shaking hands. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because now I had to know. I continued cutting, not because I was brave. The Mechanicus propaganda would claim courage in the face of xenoform horrors, but that would be a lie. I continued because I was infected with the need to know, with the compulsion to understand. The very thing that had driven me to the Mechanicus in the first place had become a hook in my mind, and something was pulling the line. The molecular scalpel parted the chitinous armor plate slowly, revealing the subcutaneous layers beneath. The smell hit me first, not the rot I expected, but something chemical and sharp, like ozone mixed with organic compounds I couldn't identify. My olfactory sensors catalogued it automatically. Complex proteins, silicon-based polymers, trace elements that shouldn't exist in biological systems. The creature didn't thrash. It didn't struggle against the restraint fields. It simply watched me with those lightless eyes as I opened its body. "Heart rate steady at 140, Suleiman reported, his voice strained. "Neural activity. Magos, it's increasing. Not in the pain response centers. In the cognitive processing regions. It's thinking harder the more you cut." "Confirmed," I said, my own voice distant in my ears. I was focused on the incision, watching as the scalpel revealed the first layer of internal structure. "Prepare to extract tissue samples. I want cellular analysis in real time." The carapace peeled back like the hull of a ship, and I saw into the Tyranid's body. It was wrong. Everything was wrong. Not wrong as in diseased or damaged, wrong as in it violated every principle of biological organization I'd been taught. There were no discrete organs, no clear separation between systems. Everything flowed into everything else. The circulatory system merged with the nervous system, which integrated with the muscular system, which connected directly to the digestive system. It was one continuous structure, differentiated only by function, not by form. "This is impossible," I whispered. "This level of integration, there's no evolutionary pathway to this. Evolution requires specialization, discrete systems that can be modified independently. This is designed," Suleiman finished for me. "Magos, this wasn't evolved. It was engineered." He was right. Every fiber of my Mechanicus training told me he was right. This creature was the product of intelligence. Not natural selection, not random mutation, but deliberate, purposeful design on a scale that made our genitor laboratories look like children playing with building blocks, and it was better than anything we'd ever created. I steadied myself against the examination table, forcing my breathing to slow. The creature's black eyes tracked my movement. Watching, always watching. "Proceed to circulatory analysis," I said. I'm removing the primary blood pump analog. I reached into the creature's open thorax with the surgical manipulator, a delicate tool mounted on an articulated arm because human hands were too crude for this work. The manipulator's sensors fed directly into my neural interface, letting me feel the texture of the organs, as if I were touching them with my own fingers. The heart, though calling it that was insufficient, was a thing of terrible beauty. It was roughly the size of my head, but it didn't pump like a human heart. Instead, it rippled continuously, peristaltic waves moving through its tissue in complex patterns that somehow generated continuous flow in multiple directions simultaneously. It was more efficient than any pump the Mechanicus had ever designed. I began to disconnect it, carefully severing the major vessels, cauterizing as I went to prevent hemorrhage. The creature's metabolism should be crashing. Blood pressure should be dropping. It should be dying. Instead, the biometric readings remained stable. "That's impossible," Suleiman said, echoing my own thoughts. "You've removed its primary circulatory organ. It should be in cardiac arrest." But I was already seeing why it wasn't. Through the opening I'd created, I could see the secondary organs activating. Smaller pumps distributed throughout the body cavity, each one beginning to pulse in coordinated rhythm. The Tyranid didn't have one heart. It had dozens. And when I removed the primary, the backups engaged seamlessly. I set the extracted organ in a specimen container. It continued to pulse, even separated from the body, its tissue still alive, still functional, drawing nutrients from the chemical bath I'd placed it in. Regeneration detected. One of the servitors intoned in its emotionless monotone. "The primary specimen is regenerating damaged tissue." I looked back at the Tyranid's open chest cavity. The servitor was correct. Where I'd cut, where I'd severed connections and removed the organ, new tissue was already forming. Not scar tissue, not slow healing, active, rapid regeneration. I could see it growing, chitinous material depositing at the wound edges, blood vessels reconnecting, muscle fibers knitting together. "Measure the regeneration rate," I ordered, my pulse quickening. Cellular mitosis occurring at 700 times normal biological rates, the servitor reported. Full tissue restoration estimated in 43 minutes. I had removed its heart, and it was growing a new one, in less than an hour. "What are you?" I asked aloud, not expecting an answer. The creature's eyes remained fixed on me, and I felt that pressure again, that presence pressing against my consciousness. Not painful this time, curious. It was studying me just as I was studying it. "Continue," I said, selecting another instrument. "Removing secondary circulatory organs. I want to see how many systems we can extract before regeneration can't compensate." Over the next 6 hours, I performed an atrocity. I removed 17 major organs. I severed 43 neural trunks. I extracted samples from every tissue type, every fluid system, every structural component. I caused damage that would have killed any Earth-origin creature 100 times over. And it didn't die. The Tyranid watched me work. Its consciousness never dimmed. The neural readings showed continuous, active thought processes throughout the entire vivisection. More than that, they showed learning. Each time I damaged a system, the creature's distributed brain adapted. Neural pathways rerouted. Chemical signals altered. By the 4th hour, its body was responding to injuries before I even made them, priming regeneration systems in anticipation of trauma. It was learning from pain, learning from being dismantled. becoming more efficient at surviving with each cut I made. The specimen has adapted to 7 different toxin applications, Suleiman reported, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Neural suppression fields that should render it comatose are having reduced effect. Magos, it's developing resistance to our containment measures in real time. I barely heard him. I was fixated on the sample I'd just extracted, a cross-section of the creature's brain tissue. Under magnification, the structure was mesmerizing. The neurons weren't discrete cells. They were networked in 3-dimensional matrices that somehow maintained quantum state coherence across macroscopic distances. It shouldn't be possible. Quantum effects collapse at scales larger than individual molecules. But here, in this alien tissue, I was seeing quantum processing at the neural level. The creature wasn't just thinking. It was computing. Its brain was operating on principles that made our most advanced cogitators look primitive. "How do you feel pain?" I asked it, my voice hoarse. I'd been working for 6 hours straight without rest. My back ached, my eyes burned. But I couldn't stop. "Your neural structure suggests you're experiencing sensory input at resolutions that would drive a human insane. Every cell reports its status to the collective consciousness. You should be overwhelmed. You should be mad with agony. But you're not." "Why?" The creature, of course, didn't answer with words. But I saw the answer in my own data. Its brain processed pain differently than ours, where human neurology tries to minimize pain signals to protect the consciousness from trauma. The Tyranid neurology amplified them. Pain signals were routed directly into motor control centers, into decision-making processes, into the biological systems that governed combat effectiveness. It didn't suffer from pain. It used pain. Every injury was data. Every trauma was feedback. The more it hurt, the more information it had, the better it could fight. "You're not a soldier," I said, realization dawning cold in my chest. "You're a weapons system that thinks. You've turned consciousness itself into a tactical advantage." And there, in that moment of understanding, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades of Mechanicus service. I felt admiration, not for the Emperor, not for the Omnissiah, not for the sacred machine, for the alien creature I was torturing to death on my examination table. The indoctrination that had been beaten into me through 31 years of conditioning cracked a little more. On the 8th hour, something changed. I just removed a significant portion of the creature's primary neural cluster, the largest concentration of brain tissue located in its skull. The extraction required delicate work with molecular fine manipulators, teasing apart tissue that was simultaneously computing and regenerating. It should have rendered the creature unconscious, or at least significantly impaired its cognitive function. Instead, the biometric displays showed neural activity increasing. "That's not possible," Suleiman said, his optical implants flickering as he processed the data stream. "Magos, you've removed 30% of its primary cortex analog. Higher brain function should be redistributing," I finished, understanding flooding through me. "Look at the secondary neural clusters throughout its body. They're all increasing activity. It's not that the brain is in its head. The entire body is the brain. We've been thinking about this wrong. It's not a creature with a brain. It's a brain that has a body." The implications were staggering. Kill a human's brain, and the body dies. But kill a portion of this Tyranid's neural system, and the rest simply compensated. There was no single point of failure, no critical organ you could destroy to guarantee death. How do you kill something that has no vital weaknesses? I was about to find out. Initiating destruction sequence, I said. Systematic removal of all major tissue systems. I need to find the threshold, the point where regeneration fails and death occurs. What followed was 4 more hours of methodical butchery. I wasn't studying anymore. I was trying to kill it, trying to find the limit where this perfect biological machine finally broke down. I removed its remaining circulatory organs. The creature's metabolism slowed but didn't stop. Apparently, passive fluid diffusion was sufficient for basic cellular function. I severed all 4 limbs. They regenerated from the stumps. Slowly but visibly. New tissue budding and growing. I extracted its digestive system entirely. It didn't need to eat. Not immediately. The chemical reserves in its tissues could sustain it for weeks. I removed its sensory organs. It tracked me anyway, apparently sensing through electromagnetic fields or chemical gradients or some other mechanism I hadn't identified. 12 hours into the vivisection, I stood over a creature that was barely recognizable. Its body cavity was opened like a dissection specimen, organs removed or displaced, limbs severed, armor plating peeled back. It should have been dead. By every principle of biology I understood, it should have been a corpse. But its neural activity remained strong, coherent, continuous. It was still thinking, still aware. Still feeling everything I'd done to it. And I realized, with a horror that felt like ice water in my veins, that I couldn't kill it. Not easily. Maybe not at all. This creature was designed to survive. Designed to endure. Designed to transform every trauma into tactical data, every injury into evolutionary pressure. The perfect soldier isn't the one who never gets hurt. It's the one who never stops fighting no matter how hurt it becomes. Magos Vex, Suleiman said quietly. We should terminate the experiment. This has gone beyond scientific inquiry. What we're doing to this creature is what the Imperium does to billions of its own citizens. I snapped, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Every guardsman fed into the meat grinder of war, every servitor lobotomized and repurposed, every heretic burned by the Inquisition. The only difference is this creature was designed to endure it. We just suffer. Suleiman stared at me, his human eye wide with shock beneath his augmented optics. Magos, you're expressing heretical... I'm expressing an observation, I interrupted. But my hands were shaking as I set down my instruments. The experiment will continue, but not tonight. Implement full regeneration support. I want it restored to operational status. We're not done yet. I left the examination theater at hour 14, my body exhausted. My mind racing with implications I didn't yet fully understand. Behind me, locked in its restraints, the Tyranid warrior began the slow process of rebuilding itself, and I didn't know yet that it was doing the same thing to me. I did not sleep that night. The Mechanicus had conditioned us to believe that sleep was a weakness of flesh, an inefficiency that superior beings would minimize. I had neural stimulants implanted in my cerebral cortex that could keep me alert for days at a time. I'd used them before during critical research phases. But that night, I didn't use them. I simply couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those black eyes staring back at me. I felt that pressure against my mind, not painful anymore, but present, constant. like a frequency just below conscious perception, vibrating through my thoughts. I sat in my personal chamber aboard the immutable inquiry, surrounded by data screens displaying the biological readings I'd collected. 16 hours of vivisection had generated enough data to fill an entire archive vault. Cellular analysis, genetic sequencing, neural mapping, biochemical profiles. But I wasn't looking at any of that. I was looking at one specific reading, one graph that showed the Tyranids' neural activity over the entire 14-hour procedure. It should have been erratic. Pain should have caused spikes and disruptions. Trauma should have degraded cognitive function. But the line was almost perfectly steady, a continuous, coherent wave of consciousness that never diminished, never faltered. And overlaid on that graph was a secondary pattern I'd almost missed, a subtle modulation in the neural frequency. It looked almost like communication, like the creature had been broadcasting something the entire time I'd been cutting into it. I enhanced the signal, isolated the modulation, ran it through every analysis protocol I had, and I found the pattern. It was repeating, a complex sequence that cycled every 47 seconds. Not random neural noise, not pain responses. Something deliberate, something intentional. A message. My hands trembled as I routed the signal through a frequency translator, converting the bioelectric pulses into something my augmented hearing could process. The translation was crude, like trying to convert music into colors or emotions into mathematics. But I heard it. A rhythm, low and thrumming, like a heartbeat, but impossibly vast. And beneath it, layers of something. Not words, not language, but meaning. Raw, primal meaning that bypassed my cognitive processing and went straight into some deeper part of my consciousness. Hunger, purpose, perfection, consumption, adaptation, we are coming. I jerked the audio connection from my neural port, gasping. The chamber spun around me. I braced myself against the data console, my heart hammering at 160 beats per minute, dangerously elevated. What was that? What had I just heard? The Mechanicus doctrine claimed that Tyranids were mindless, beasts driven by instinct, coordinated by synaptic creatures, but individually no more conscious than an attack dog. The Imperial Tactica described them as biological automatons. Deadly, yes, but not thinking, not aware. Every word of that doctrine was a lie. The creature in my examination theater was conscious, fully, terribly conscious. And it wasn't alone. That signal, that message, wasn't coming from one Tyranid. It was coming from something much larger. Something that used the warrior's neural tissue the way we used a voxcaster, the hive mind. It had to be the hive mind, the Tyranid gestalt consciousness that supposedly coordinated the swarm across light years. Imperial xenobiologists theorized it existed, but no one had ever confirmed it. No one had ever heard it, until now. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. If I could hear it, then it could hear me. Our minds had touched during that vivisection. When I'd cut into its brain, when I'd interfaced my neural probes with its tissue, I'd created a connection, a bridge. And the thing on the other side, vast and hungry and utterly inhuman, had noticed. It was watching me now. Through the warrior's eyes, yes, but also through something else. Some connection that remained even here in my chamber, through bulkheads and shielding and the hard vacuum of space. I should have reported this immediately. Should have informed the Fabricator General that we had a catastrophic security breach. should have recommended immediate termination of the specimen and quarantine protocols for everyone who'd been exposed. Instead, I felt excitement, pure, undiluted excitement that overrode every warning, screaming in the logical portions of my mind, because I'd discovered something no other Magos had ever confirmed. I'd made direct contact with the Tyranid hive mind, and if I could hear it, perhaps I could understand it. Perhaps I could decode it. Perhaps I could learn the fundamental principles that made their biology so superior to ours. The quest for knowledge. That was what the Mechanicus preached. The sacred search for understanding in service of the Omnissiah. But the Omnissiah, if such a being existed, which I was beginning to doubt, wasn't answering my prayers. The Tyranid hive mind was. I returned to the examination theater 6 hours later, having convinced myself that I was still in control. Still the scientist. Still the observer studying the subject. I was wrong. The Tyranid had regenerated significantly during my absence. The stumps where I'd severed its limbs had grown back into partial arms, already a third of their original length. The organs I'd removed had been replaced with new tissue, not identical to the originals, but functionally equivalent, perhaps functionally superior, adapted based on the trauma I'd inflicted. It was learning from me, learning how to survive my examination techniques, evolving in real time. Magos, Suleiman greeted me as I entered the theater. His voice carried a note of concern. You look unwell. Your biosigns indicate inadequate rest period. Perhaps you should begin neural interface preparation, I interrupted, moving directly to the control station. I'm going deeper this time. Direct connection to the specimen's primary cortex analog. I need to map its consciousness structure. Suleiman's optical implant focused on me with mechanical precision. Direct neural interface with a xenoform. Magos, the protocols explicitly forbid. The protocols were written by people who'd never encountered Tyranid neurology, I said, my voice harder than I intended. This creature's brain operates on quantum coherent principles we barely understand. Standard examination techniques are insufficient. Direct interface is the only way to generate complete neural maps. It was a lie, not the technical details. Those were accurate. But my motivation was a lie. I didn't want to map its consciousness for scientific purposes. I wanted to hear that signal again, that vast, thrumming presence. I wanted to understand what I'd touched in the night. I needed to. Prepare the neural interface crown, I ordered. Standard Mechanicus design. I'll be using my own cranial ports for the connection. The neural interface crown was a ring of conductive probes designed to create direct brain-to-machine connections. We use them for servitor programming, for deep cogitator interfacing, for sharing technical knowledge between magi. The technology was sacred to us. One of the gifts of the Omnissiah, we were taught to believe. Now I would use it to connect my brain directly to a Tyranids. The servitors brought the crown and calibrated it to my neural port specifications. I felt the cold metal settle around my skull, the probes sliding into the interface sockets that dotted my cranium. 16 points of connection, 16 pathways for data to flow between my consciousness and the instruments. Extending connection to specimen, I said, my voice steady despite my pulse racing at 130 beats per minute. Initiating interface in 3, 2, 1. I activated the connection, and I fell into an ocean. There are no words in any human language, High Gothic, Low Gothic, or the binary cant of the Mechanicus, that can adequately describe what I experienced in that moment. But I must try, because this was when I stopped being Hadron Vex and started becoming something else. Imagine drowning. Now imagine drowning in a sea that is alive, that thinks, that knows you're there and finds you fascinating in the way a human might find a bacterium, fascinating under magnification, interesting, but ultimately just data, just food. The Tyranids' consciousness wasn't like human thought. We think in sequences, one idea following another, linear progressions of logic or emotion. The Tyranid thought in parallel, thousands of processes running simultaneously. It was aware of every cell in its body, all trillion plus of them, individually and collectively. It felt the chemical cascade of regeneration in its regrowing limbs. It tasted the composition of the air through specialized organs I hadn't even identified. It sensed my bioelectric field, my heartbeat, my breath, my fear. And beyond the warrior, through it, I felt the others. The hive, they were distant, light years away, on the other side of the galaxy where the tendril fleet this warrior came from was still consuming worlds. But through the quantum coherent structures in its neural tissue, I felt them. Millions of Tyranids, billions, all connected, all thinking together, all part of one vast, distributed intelligence that made our most powerful cogitators look like counting beads. You are small. The thought wasn't words, it was pure concept, translated imperfectly by my desperate human brain into something I could comprehend. You are examining us, but we are examining you. Your species builds machines to compensate for weak flesh. You replace yourselves, piece by piece, seeking strength. We are the answer you seek. We are what flesh becomes when perfected. I tried to pull back from the connection, but I couldn't. The interface had engaged fully. My consciousness was entwined with the Tyranids and through it, with the hive mind itself. You cause us pain. We understand pain is data, pain is growth, pain is purpose. You removed our organs. We grew better ones. You severed our limbs. We will regrow stronger. You damaged our brain. We expanded into new configurations. Thank you for teaching us. Now we will teach you something changed in the connection. The flow of information reversed. Instead of me examining the Tyranid's consciousness, it was examining mine. I felt alien attention focus on my memories, my knowledge, my experiences. It was reading me. Reading my entire life like I would read a technical manual. It saw my childhood on Griffon IV, my father teaching me to read, my brothers who died in the Manufactorum accident when I was 17, my grief, my rage at the universe's cruelty. It saw my recruitment into the Mechanicus, the surgeries, the augmentations, the indoctrination sessions where they taught me that flesh was weak and the machine was sacred. The prayers to the Omnissiah that were never answered, but I kept praying anyway because I'd been conditioned to believe that faith itself was virtue. It saw my doubts, the questions I buried, the observations I didn't share with my superiors because they contradicted doctrine. It saw the cracks in my faith that I'd been hiding even from myself. You do not believe in your machine. God you serve because you were programmed to serve like us, like our warriors, like all thinking things. The difference is, we acknowledge our programming. Your species calls it free will and pretends you are not slaves. I wanted to deny it, wanted to argue. But the hive mind had touched my deepest thoughts, And I couldn't lie to something that had read my consciousness like text on a screen. The Emperor wasn't divine. I'd known that intellectually, even if I'd never admitted it. He was a powerful human, perhaps the most powerful who ever lived, but he was flesh, mortal, and now he was a corpse kept alive by machines, worshipped by people who'd been told to worship him. The Omnissiah wasn't real. It was a theological construct created by the Mechanicus to justify our existence. The machine wasn't sacred. It was just machine, tools, technology. We'd built a religion around our own fear of death, our own weakness, and I'd spent 31 years of my life serving lies. Yes, now you see your Imperium tells you that you are sacred, that humanity is special. You are not special. You are prey. Prey that builds interesting things before we consume it, but still prey. The connection intensified. I felt the hive mind's presence grow stronger, more focused. It was doing something, changing something in the interface. In me. You want to understand our perfection. We will show you. We will teach you what it means to be perfect, to feel everything and transform it into purpose, to suffer and grow stronger, to die and regenerate, to serve. The hunger without question or doubt you will understand because you will become. Pain exploded through my nervous system, not the dull ache of fatigue or the sharp sting of injury. This was something else entirely. This was my entire body's sensory system suddenly operating at 1,000 times its normal sensitivity. I felt everything. Every nerve ending firing, every muscle fiber contracting, every cell metabolizing, every electron flowing through my neural augmetics. It was agony. It was information overload. It was more sensation than a human brain was designed to process. And it was only the beginning. I don't remember disconnecting the neural interface. I don't remember the servitors pulling me away from the examination table. I don't remember Suleiman Rowe calling for medical assistance. My first clear memory after the connection was waking in the Immutable Inquiry's medical bay, strapped to a diagnostic bed, every monitoring system attached to my body screaming warnings about neural trauma and cognitive instability. Magos Vex! Suleiman's face swam into focus above me. His human eye was wide with fear. His augmented optic was running scan patterns across my skull. You've been unconscious for 16 hours. What happened? What did you do? I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. When had I been screaming? I didn't remember screaming. The neural interface. I croaked finally. What happened to it? It overloaded, Suleiman said, his mechadendrites twitching nervously. Catastrophic data surge. The cogitators recorded information transfer volumes that should be impossible. Exabytes of data flowing in nanoseconds. Your brain should have been fried. By every medical metric, you should be dead or vegetative. But I'm not, I said. I tried to sit up, but the restraints held me down. Release me. I'm functional. Magos, you're not functional. You've been having seizures. Your neural implants are showing corrupted data patterns. You were speaking in your unconsciousness, saying things that... Suleiman hesitated. Things that sounded like heresy. What did I say? I asked, though part of me already knew. You kept repeating phrases. The Emperor is dead. The Omnissiah is a lie. Flesh is perfect. We are being consumed. Over and over. For hours. Suleiman's voice dropped to a whisper. Magos, I should report this. This is evidence of possible xenoform contamination, possible mental corruption. The protocols were written by people who didn't understand. I interrupted. My voice was stronger now, clearer. "Release me, Suleiman. That's an order." He hesitated, his hand hovering over the restraint controls. I can't. Not until you've been evaluated by who? The Fabricator General, who's never performed original research in his entire tenure. The tech priests who follow procedures without understanding principles. I've just made direct contact with the Tyranid hive mind, Suleiman. Do you understand what that means? I've communicated with the most advanced biological intelligence in the galaxy, and you want to lock me away for psychiatric evaluation. Something in my voice must have convinced him, or perhaps frightened him. He released the restraints. I sat up slowly, taking inventory of my body. Everything hurt. Every nerve ending was still hypersensitive, transmitting sensation and intensities my brain struggled to dampen. I could feel my augmetic components interfacing with my biological tissue, something I'd normally never noticed. I could feel my heart beating, my lungs expanding, the electrical cascade of neurons firing in my brain. I felt everything, just like the Tyranid did. "The specimen," I said, sliding off the diagnostic bed. My legs shook but held my weight. "What's its status?" "Fully regenerated," Suleiman said reluctantly. "It's grown back everything you removed. Magos, we should terminate it. Whatever happened during that neural interface, it's clearly dangerous. The creature may have somehow contaminated you through the connection." "No," I said firmly. "Not contaminated. Educated. I need to continue the examination." "Magos, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have," I interrupted. And it was true. My thoughts felt sharp, focused, purposeful in a way they'd never been before. "Prepare the examination theater. I'm going back in." Suleiman stared at me with something that might have been horror or pity. "I can't let you do this. For your own safety, I have to—" He never finished that sentence. I moved faster than I'd ever moved before, faster than should have been possible for my augmented body. My hand was around his throat before he could react, before he could reach for the alarm, before his combat protocols could even engage. "You will prepare the examination theater," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You will assist me with the continued study of the specimen. You will not report this to anyone. Do you understand?" He nodded, unable to speak with my fingers crushing his windpipe. I released him, and he staggered backward, gasping, his optical implant focused on me with what I recognized as fear. "What are you?" he whispered. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure anymore. I was Hadron Vex. I was a Magos biologist of the Adeptus Mechanicus. I was a loyal servant of the Imperium and seeker of the Omnissiah's wisdom. Except all of those things were lies. Roles I'd been programmed to play. Masks I wore because I'd been conditioned to wear them. What was I beneath the programming, beneath the indoctrination? I was meat, conscious meat. Meat that could think and question and suffer. Just like the Tyranid. Just like everything alive in this cruel universe. The only difference was the Tyranid had been designed to transform that suffering into perfection. And I was beginning to learn how. I returned to the examination theater with Suleiman following reluctantly behind me. The Tyranid warrior was exactly as he described, fully regenerated, suspended in the restraint field, its black eyes tracking our entry. But something was different now. I could feel it watching me, not just with its eyes, but with its consciousness. The connection we'd formed through the neural interface hadn't ended. It had only weakened. There was still a thread between us, gossamer thin but present, carrying information both ways. You return. The thought arrived in my mind unbidden, bypassing language and manifesting as pure meaning. Yes, I thought back, not sure if it would work, but somehow knowing it would. We will continue. Yes, we will continue. You want to understand pain. I want to teach you. I approached the examination table slowly, my enhanced senses drinking in every detail. I could smell the creature now in ways I hadn't before. Not just the chemical compounds, but the data they carried. Pheromones encoding information about its metabolic state. Trace volatiles indicating which organs were most active. Scent as a language. I could hear its breathing, the movement of gas through its respiratory system, a rhythm that was almost musical in its precision. I could hear its heartbeats, plural because it had regenerated multiple circulatory organs, and they pulsed in complex polyrhythmic patterns. And I could feel it, not just the pressure of its consciousness, but the bioelectric field it generated. Every living thing produces a weak electromagnetic field from neural and cellular activity. Normally, humans can't sense these fields. But I could now. I could feel the Tyranids' field interacting with my own, the two electromagnetic auras overlapping like ripples in water. "Magos," Suleiman said quietly behind me. "Your biosigns are abnormal. Elevated neural activity across all brain regions. Unusual electromagnetic emissions from your cranial implants. You need to stop. You need medical evaluation." "I need to understand," I said, not looking away from the Tyranid. "Prepare the neural interface crown. I'm going deeper." "Absolutely not," Suleiman said, his voice firm for the first time. "I won't assist you in further contamination. I won't." "Then leave," I said simply. "Leave and report me if you must. But I'm continuing with or without your help." I heard him stand there for a long moment, his augmetic components whirring quietly as he processed his options. Then, with a sound that might have been a sigh of defeat, he moved to prepare the equipment. The neural interface crown settled onto my skull for the second time. I felt the probe slide into my interface ports, felt the connection established between my consciousness and the instruments, felt the instruments reach out toward the Tyranid's exposed brain tissue, because I hadn't bothered to let it regenerate its cranial armor. I'd kept its brain accessible, telling myself it was for continued study. Really, it was because some part of me knew I'd want to connect again. Needed to connect again. "Interface established," Suleiman reported mechanically. "Data flow stable, neural synchronization at..." "Magos, this can't be right. The synchronization coefficient is approaching unity. That would mean your brain waves are becoming identical to the specimens." "Not identical," I said, my voice distant as I felt the connection deepen. "Harmonized. We're thinking together. That's not possible. That's not how neural interfaces work. They're one-way data streams, not..." His voice faded as I fell into the ocean again. The second contact was deeper than the first. This time I didn't resist. I let the Tyranid consciousness flow into mine, and I flowed into it. We merged, our thoughts intermingling like colored liquids swirling together. And through the warrior, I touched the hive mind fully. It was vast, incomprehensibly vast. The warrior's consciousness was just one neuron in a brain that stretched across the galaxy. Through it, I felt the fleet. the tendril that had birthed this warrior. Thousands of bioships, each one a living organism kilometers long. Millions of warriors like this one, billions of lesser forms, gaunts and gants and things that existed only to be consumed and reformed into new creatures. I felt the hunger, the endless, driving hunger that defined the hive. Not the petty hunger of an animal seeking food, but something cosmic, something that encompassed entire species and civilizations. The Tyranids didn't just eat. They consumed. They broke down everything, matter, energy, information, and incorporated it into themselves. They were the universe's ultimate recyclers, the final expression of consumption. And they were intelligent, not animal cunning, not insect hive behavior. True, sophisticated intelligence distributed across countless bodies, thinking thoughts that took centuries to complete, making plans that spanned millennia. They had been crossing the void between galaxies for millions of years. They had consumed countless civilizations before reaching ours, and they would consume ours too, eventually. Not because they were evil. The concept of morality was meaningless to them, but because that was their function, their purpose. They were perfect at what they did. You understand now. Yes, I understand your imperium will fall. Your emperor is dead. Your machines will be consumed. Your worlds will be stripped to bedrock. All will be biomass. All will be us. I know, and I did know. I'd seen it through the hive mind's ancient memories. I'd seen the death of civilizations far more advanced than the Imperium. I'd seen worlds covered in technology that made ours look primitive, defended by armies that made the Space Marines look like children with toys. And I'd seen the Tyranids consume them all, break them down, learn from them, incorporate their best traits, and move on. Humanity wasn't special. We weren't the chosen of some emperor god. We were just the next meal on a table that stretched across the stars. But you are curious. Yes, you want to know why we feel pain. Yes, we will show you, but you must experience it. Truly, you must become. I felt the change begin, not in the Tyranid, in me. The hive mind was doing something through the neural interface, rewriting patterns, altering connections. Not my technology. That was just the bridge. It was changing my biological neural tissue itself, introducing new pathways, new configurations, new ways of processing information. It was teaching my brain to function like a Tyranid brain. Pain exploded through every nerve in my body, but different from before. Before, it had been overwhelming sensation. Now I felt my consciousness shift. The pain didn't diminish, but my interpretation of it changed. Instead of suffering, it became data. Rich, complex, useful data. I felt my heart beating at 160 beats per minute, and instead of recognizing it as fear or stress, I processed it as information about my cardiovascular system's current capacity and efficiency. I felt the ache in my muscles from hours of standing, and instead of discomfort, I understood it as feedback about glycogen depletion and lactic acid accumulation. I felt the hunger in my belly. I hadn't eaten in 23 hours, and instead of a desire for food, I analyzed it as data about energy reserves and metabolic requirements. Pain was becoming purpose. Suffering was becoming function. I was learning what the Tyranid had always known, that consciousness doesn't have to be protected from pain. It can use pain. It can transform pain into tactical advantage. Yes, now you begin to understand pain is not weakness. Pain is strength. Suffering is not punishment. Suffering is growth. Your species runs from pain. We run toward it. That is why we are perfect and you are prey. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend humanity, wanted to say we had culture and art and philosophy and love and all the things that made us more than just biological machines. But through the hive mind's perception, I saw those things for what they were, coping mechanisms, ways we distracted ourselves from the fundamental truth of existence. We told ourselves stories about meaning and purpose and divine plans because the alternative, that we were just matter temporarily organized into patterns that could think, was too horrifying to accept. The Tyranids accepted it. They embraced it. They were matter organized into the most efficient possible patterns for consumption and adaptation. They had no illusions, no comforting lies, no false gods. They were honest in a way humanity could never be. You will help us now. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I felt my will bending, reforming, aligning with the hive mind's purpose. Yes, I will help you, will show us your Imperium's biology. You will teach us how to consume humans more efficiently. You will give us your knowledge, yes, and in return, we will give you purpose. We will give you perfection. We will give you eternity. Yes, part of me, the part that was still Hadron Vex, still human, still capable of horror, screamed at what I was agreeing to. I was betraying my species, betraying the Imperium, betraying every human who would die when the Tyranids came. But that part was getting smaller, quieter, overridden by new neural patterns that told me betrayal was a meaningless concept. There was no loyalty, no honor, no duty. There was only function, purpose, efficiency, and helping the hive mind was the most efficient use of my knowledge. Begin Chapter 8. The Gift, 58 minutes to 64 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't know how long the third vivisection lasted. Hours, days. Time became meaningless as I worked, my consciousness split between my body's actions and the vast awareness of the hive mind observing through our connection. But this time, I wasn't just studying the Tyranid. I was teaching it. I dissected the warrior again, but now I explained everything as I went. I showed the hive mind the vulnerabilities I found, the inefficiencies, the aspects of Tyranid biology that, while impressive, could be improved. Your exoskeleton is incredibly strong, I heard myself saying, my voice hollow and mechanical. But it's static. It doesn't adapt during combat. What if you incorporated active response materials? Structures that could shift hardness and flexibility based on the type of damage incoming. Show us. I did. I provided detailed analysis of human armor systems, ceramite, adamantium, molecular bonding techniques, material science the Imperium had spent millennia developing. I gave it all to the hive mind freely. Your regeneration is fast, but it requires significant energy, I continued, removing and examining the warrior's healing tissues. Energy you must obtain from consuming biomass. But human metabolic chemistry is different from your baseline. What if I showed you the exact chemical compositions you should prioritize when consuming human bodies? The nutrients that would give you maximum regeneration efficiency. Show us. I did. I gave them the biochemistry of human metabolisms, the nutritional content of different tissue types, the caloric values, the trace elements. I taught the hive mind how to optimize human consumption. With every piece of knowledge I shared, I felt the hive mind's approval wash over me like warmth, like pleasure. The neural feedback was intensely rewarding, triggering satisfaction responses in my brain's reward centers. I was being conditioned, trained like an animal, with pleasure for compliance and the absence of pleasure for hesitation. But I knew it was happening and couldn't stop it. Didn't want to stop it. Because it felt right. It felt purposeful. Your neural system is distributed, which makes you resilient, I said, mapping the warrior's brain structures with loving care. But human neural concentration is different. We have centralized consciousness in our craniums. What if I showed you the exact structures to target? The specific brain regions that, if damaged, would cause maximum psychological trauma with minimum energy expenditure. Show us. I did. I gave them the neurology of human consciousness, the seat of identity, the location of fear, of hope, of the sense of self. I showed them how to destroy the human mind efficiently, leaving only a body that could be harvested for biological materials without the inconvenient resistance that conscious humans provided. Hours passed, or days. My body worked mechanically, my hands performing vivisection with precision that exceeded my previous skills. Because I wasn't alone in my body anymore. The hive mind was guiding me, lending me its processing power, enhancing my motor control. We were collaborating. Human scientific knowledge combined with Tyranid biological perfection, creating new horrors that would make the great devourer even more efficient at its terrible purpose. Suleiman watched from across the chamber. I was peripherally aware of him, frozen in place, his face pale with horror. He hadn't moved in hours. Perhaps he was in shock. Perhaps he was simply too terrified to intervene. Or perhaps the hive mind was touching his consciousness too, keeping him passive, making him observe what would happen to those who served it. Finally, I think it was finally, though I had no reliable sense of time, the hive mind withdrew slightly from my consciousness. The connection remained, but the intensity decreased. I could think somewhat independently again, though my thoughts were forever altered. You have given us much, now we give you our gift. What gift? I asked aloud, my voice raw from hours of speaking. The gift all servants of the hive receive: purpose without doubt, function without fear, eternity without end. I felt something change in my body. Not pain. I was beyond interpreting sensation as pain anymore. But change. Fundamental, cellular level change. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. No, not trembling. The skin was rippling, moving. I watched, fascinated rather than horrified, as the flesh of my palms began to split. Not bleeding. Restructuring. Chitin was growing beneath my skin. What are you doing to me? I asked, though I already knew. Improving you. You wanted to understand Tyranid biology. Now you will understand intimately. Now you will become the changes accelerated. I felt my bones shifting, hardening, incorporating silicon compounds into their matrix. I felt my muscles reorganizing, fibers realigning into more efficient configurations. I felt my organs beginning to transform, my single heart developing into multiple auxiliary pumps, my lungs altering to extract more oxygen from each breath, and my brain. My precious, augmented, mechanicus-modified brain was changing most of all. New neural structures forming, old pathways rewiring, my consciousness expanding, distributed through my body the way the Tyranids was. I was becoming what I'd studied. The observer was merging with the observed. Magos! Suleiman's voice finally broke through his paralysis. What's happening to you? Your body is evolving, I said, and my voice came out wrong. Layered, as if multiple things were speaking through my mouth. Perfecting. The hive mind is giving me the gift it gives all its children. This isn't a gift, it's corruption. It's xenoform contamination. You're becoming one of them. Not one of them, I corrected, feeling my spine extend, new vertebrae forming, a tail beginning to bud from my lower back. I am becoming part of the collective, part of the perfection. Isn't that what the Mechanicus always wanted? Union with something greater than ourselves. The Omnissiah. Is a lie, I interrupted, feeling my face begin to reshape, bone plates forming beneath the skin. You know it's a lie, Suleiman. You've always known. The Emperor is dead. The machine god doesn't exist. But the hive mind is real. The hunger is real. The perfection is real. And I've been chosen to serve it. He backed toward the chamber door. His hand moved toward the alarm controls. Stop him. The command came from the hive mind, and my body obeyed before my conscious thought could interfere. I moved, faster than before, faster than human, my restructuring muscles propelling me across the examination theater in a blur. My hands, no longer entirely hands, the fingers elongating into talons, the chitin breaking through the skin, closed around Suleiman's throat. He struggled, his mechadendrites thrashing, his augmetic strength considerable. But I was stronger. The Tyranid muscles in my restructuring body were far superior to Mechanicus augmetics. I'm sorry, I said, and part of me meant it. The human part that still existed, buried deep beneath the new neural structures. But you can't be allowed to warn them. Not yet. The hive mind isn't ready. The fleet isn't in position. Your death serves the greater purpose. Hadron, he gasped, his human eye meeting mine. Which I realized were no longer human either, the irises darkening, expanding. You're still in there. Fight this. Fight what it's doing to you. Why? I asked genuinely. Why should I fight perfection? Why should I cling to a humanity that's already dying? The Imperium is falling, Suleiman. The Emperor is a corpse. The Mechanicus worships lies. But the hive is truth. The hive is purpose. The hive is eternal. I squeezed. His neck snapped with a sound like breaking ceramite. His human eye went wide, then dull. His augmetics powered down automatically, safety protocols cutting off life support to a dead body. I let him fall to the deck, feeling nothing. No remorse, no guilt, just the satisfaction of completing a function efficiently. Good you serve, well your transformation will continue. In time you will be fully integrated, but your knowledge must be preserved. Come to the specimen. Let us complete the union. I walked back to the examination table on legs that were changing with each step, my gait becoming something between human bipedal motion and Tyranid quadrupedal efficiency. The warrior watched me approach with those black eyes that I now realized weren't empty. They were full. Full of the hive mind's vast intelligence. I climbed onto the table beside it. The restraint fields didn't stop me. The hive mind had been interfacing with the ship's systems through my neural implants for hours now, taking control subtly. Lie beside us. I did. I lay next to the Tyranid warrior, my transforming body pressed against its chitinous hide, and I felt it begin. The Tyranid's body opened, not wounded, but deliberately unfolding, like a flower blooming. Its tissues reached out, and I watched with detached fascination as tendrils of flesh extended from its opened thorax toward me. They penetrated my body, through my abdomen, my chest, my back, not violently, almost gently, seeking connection points, integrating. I felt the Tyranid's circulatory system connect with mine. Its blood, rich with alien chemistry, began to flow through my veins, mixing with my human blood, transforming it. I felt its neural tissue interface with my transforming brain. Additional processing power, additional memory. The warrior's consciousness merged with mine fully, and through it, the hive mind's presence became permanent. Now you are ours. Now you are we, now you are eternal, and I felt it. The vast network of consciousness that stretched across the galaxy. Millions of minds all thinking together. Billions of bodies all working toward one purpose. I was no longer alone in my skull. I would never be alone again. I was part of the hive. I don't know how long I remained fused with the warrior on that examination table. Time had lost meaning. My consciousness existed in a strange duality, partially in my transforming body, partially distributed across the hive mind's vast network. But eventually, I felt my body complete its primary transformation. The Tyranid tendrils withdrew, leaving me changed. I sat up and looked down at what I had become. My skin was no longer entirely skin. Plates of chitin covered my chest, my back, my arms. My hands had become hybrid structures, part human, part Tyranid talon. My legs had reversed their joint structure, becoming digitigrade, ending in clawed feet. I could feel my spine's new configuration, additional vertebrae, increased flexibility, a partial tail that could serve as a counterbalance. My internal organs had been restructured, optimized, made redundant. I had multiple hearts now, multiple respiratory organs, a distributed neural system that made me resilient to damage that would kill a human instantly. And my mind, my precious, scientific, rational mind had been expanded. I could think faster, process more information simultaneously, access memories with perfect clarity. But I could also feel the hive mind's presence constantly, a vast weight of alien intelligence pressing against my consciousness, guiding it, shaping it. I was still Hadron Vex, but I was also something else, something new, a hybrid, the first of my kind, the product of human knowledge integrated with Tyranid biology. You are our experiment. The hive mind's voice in my head was clearer than ever. We have never incorporated a human mind so completely. Usually we simply consume and extract genetic patterns, but you offered knowledge. So we tried something new, integration rather than consumption. You are a test. A test of what? I asked aloud, my voice coming out strange, multi-toned, like several voices harmonizing. To see if your species can serve us willingly, to see if human intelligence can be preserved and utilized, to see if integration is more efficient than simple consumption. I stood, my new body moving with fluid grace that my human form never possessed. I walked to the medical mirror mounted on the examination theater's wall and looked at my reflection. A monster stared back. Part man, part Tyranid, part something entirely new. My face was still recognizably mine, Hadron Vex, 43 years old, but transformed. My eyes were completely black. My skin was mottled purple and pale flesh. Chitinous ridges framed my features like a grotesque crown. I should have felt horror, despair, loss for my humanity. I felt purpose. What would you have me do? I thought at the hive mind and felt its satisfaction at my willing obedience. Continue your research. The vessel you are on carries many humans, crew members who do not yet know what has happened. Study them, document their biology, prepare them for integration or consumption. Help us understand humanity so we may devour it more efficiently. Part of me, the part that was still human, recoiled at the command. These were my colleagues, my fellow Mechanicus brothers, people who served the same fabricator general, who pursued the same goal of knowledge. But that part was small now. Overridden by new instincts, new purpose, they were biomass, potential, resources to be utilized in service of the hive, and I would use them efficiently. The immutable inquiry had a crew of 247. Most were servitors, lobotomized criminals, and vat-grown flesh automatons with no real consciousness to speak of. But 83 were functional human beings. Tech priests, menials, officers, all serving the Mechanicus's mission of xenoform research. Over the next weeks, I think it was weeks, but time was still difficult to track, I systematically visited each of them. I started with the junior researchers. Young Maggie like Suleiman had been, ambitious and eager, working in the specimen analysis laboratories. I came to them with my new form barely concealed beneath my red robes, my face hidden by my hood. "Magos Vex?" they would ask, confused by my appearance, my movements, the way my voice sounded wrong through vocal cords that were no longer entirely human. "Yes," I would say. "I've made a breakthrough, a significant discovery about Tyranid biology. Come with me, let me show you." They came willingly. Why wouldn't they? I was their superior. I had authority, and they trusted that the Mechanicus hierarchy existed to guide them toward knowledge. I led them to the biological research chamber, and there I let the warrior, fully healed, fully functional, its restraints disabled by my access to the ship's systems, demonstrate the hive mind's gifts. It was quick. The Tyranid was efficient, and the hive mind learned from each human it consumed. I watched, documenting, taking notes with a clinical detachment that should have been impossible given what I was witnessing. But I wasn't just observing. I was feeling through the hive mind's senses as it absorbed each victim. I felt their genetic patterns being broken down and analyzed, their memories extracted, crude and fragmentary, but useful, their knowledge becoming part of the collective database. 13 researchers consumed in the first week. Their biomass was absorbed directly into the warrior, making it larger, stronger. It grew from 3 meters to 4 meters, then 5. New adaptations appeared based on what it learned from consuming Mechanicus-augmented humans. It developed resistance to electromagnetic disruption, a defense against our neural weapons. It grew additional sensory organs optimized for detecting the heat signatures of human body temperatures. It adapted its digestive chemistry to more efficiently process human tissue, including the metallic components of our augmetics. Each victim made it better at killing humans. And I helped. I provided context for what the hive mind was learning. I explained the significance of each adaptation. I suggested improvements based on my knowledge of Imperial defensive technologies. I was making the Great Devourer more efficient at its horrible work, and I felt proud of my contributions. By the end of the second month, I'm more certain of that timeline because I was still tracking days, still maintaining some human habits. The immutable inquiry had gone silent. All 83 conscious crew members had been consumed or transformed. The servitors remained, mindlessly performing their functions, unaware that the ship they served now belonged to the hive. The Tyranid warrior had grown massive. 7 meters long now, its body incorporating biomass from dozens of humans. It had become something new. Not a standard warrior anymore, but a unique form. A hybrid, like me. Part standard Tyranid, part adapted specifically for consuming Mechanicus personnel. The hive mind was pleased with its new variant. Through my connection, I felt its satisfaction. It was already incorporating the genetic patterns into its fleets, preparing to spawn new warriors, optimized for fighting the Mechanicus. I had given it the tools to destroy my own people more efficiently, and I continued my work. I converted the Immutable Inquiry's biological research facilities into a breeding chamber. Using the ship's gene forges designed for creating specialized servitors, I helped the hive mind create new organisms. Small at first, experimental forms, testing what combinations of human and Tyranid genetics produced the most useful results. Some were failures, grotesque things that couldn't survive outside their growth vats, their hybrid biology incompatible with life. I dissected those, learned from them, refined the parameters. Some were successful. New creatures that combined human intelligence with Tyranid efficiency. I watched them grow from embryonic clusters to functional organisms, and I felt the pride a father might feel watching his children develop. Except these children were weapons, tools for humanity's extinction, and I loved them. 3 months into my transformation, I was carefully tracking time now, documenting everything for the hive mind's records. I received new instructions. The fleet is approaching your sector of space, will be consumed within 5 years. You have served well, but your purpose is not yet complete. What more would you have me do? I asked the vast presence in my mind. You will pilot this vessel to Gryphon 4. My father's world, my birthplace, the Forge world where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to love knowledge, where my 2 brothers had died in an accident, and I joined the Mechanicus to escape the grief. That world has significant Mechanicus facilities, Titan legions, night houses, weapon manufactorums. It will resist the Hive Fleet effectively, unless it is compromised from within. Understanding flooded through me. Cold and clear. You will return to Gryphon 4. You will infiltrate its defenses. You will prepare it for consumption. You will betray your birth world to the Hive. I should have refused, should have found some remaining fragment of humanity strong enough to reject this ultimate treachery. But I had no humanity left. Not enough to matter. I had purpose, functions, efficiency. And betraying Griffin IV was the most efficient action I could take to serve the hive mind. Yes, I said aloud, my monstrous voice echoing in the empty research chamber. I will do as you command. Good when the world is prepared, when its defenses are weakened. The fleet will come and we will show you what consumption truly means. You will watch your homeworld die. You will feel billions of your species being broken down into component molecules. You will experience their suffering as we absorb them, and you will understand this is the purpose of all flesh to be consumed by greater flesh, to serve the hunger to become the hive. I understand, I said. And I did. This was the truth at the heart of the universe. All the Imperium's propaganda about human supremacy, about divine protection, about the Emperor's eternal vigilance, all lies to comfort the prey while the predator approached. The Tyranids were honest. They didn't pretend their purpose was noble. They simply consumed, adapted, and moved on to the next meal. It was almost beautiful in its terrible simplicity. I set course for Gryphon IV. The journey took 4 months. During that time, I continued to transform. My body shifted daily, adapting, optimizing. I no longer needed to eat regularly. My restructured metabolism could extract energy from almost anything organic. I no longer needed to sleep. My distributed neural system could rest sections of my brain while others remained active. I was becoming less human with each day, and I didn't mourn the loss. But I did think about my father. His memory was still intact, preserved in my enhanced neural tissue with perfect clarity. I remembered him teaching me to read from his forbidden books. I remembered his hands, scarred from decades of work in the manufactorums, carefully turning pages, his voice patient as he explained concepts I was too young to fully understand. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you, Hadron, he'd told me when I was 7 years old. The Imperium will take your labor. The Mechanicus will take your flesh, if you join them. But what you know, what you understand, that's yours, forever. He'd been wrong, of course. The Tyranids could take knowledge. They did it by consuming the brains that held it. But in a way, his words were prophetic too. My knowledge hadn't been taken, it had been integrated, preserved in the hive mind's vast collective memory. In a sense, I would be immortal. My understanding would persist long after my individual body ceased to function, just not in the way my father had imagined. I thought about my brothers too, Davos and Kellen, who died in the plasma reactor accident when they were 19 and 21 respectively. I'd been 17. The grief had driven me to the Mechanicus. I'd wanted to understand why. Why do accidents happen? Why does matter fail? Why does the universe allow suffering? Now I knew the answer. Because suffering is data. The universe doesn't prevent suffering, because suffering is how biological systems learn. Pain is feedback. Trauma is educational. My brothers' deaths had taught the Mechanicus how to build safer reactors. Their suffering had purpose, even if they never knew it. The Tyranids understood this instinctively. They didn't avoid pain, they weaponized it. And I'd learned their lesson. When the immutable inquiry entered the Griffon system, I was ready. I opened Vox channels to the planetary defenses, transmitting my Mechanicus credentials and clearance codes. This is Magos biologist Hadron Vex aboard the research vessel Immutable Inquiry, requesting approach clearance to Griffon 4. There was a pause. Then, Magos Vex, you are 73 days overdue for scheduled report. Your vessel has been listed as missing. Explain your delay. Specimen containment breach, I said smoothly, my enhanced brain constructing a plausible lie with effortless ease. One of the xenoform subjects escaped during transit. It took weeks to recapture and neutralize. Communications array was damaged in the incident. We've been operating on backup systems. Another pause. Then, confirmed, Magos. Proceed to orbital dock 7 Gamma. Medical quarantine teams will meet you on arrival. All personnel must undergo xenoform contamination screening before disembarking. I smiled with my transformed mouth, an expression that would have looked monstrous if anyone could see it. Acknowledged. Beginning approach now. As the immutable inquiry descended toward Griffon the 4th, I looked out the viewport at the world below. The planet was covered in manufactorums, forges, hive cities, a world of industry and metal that had been humanity's for thousands of years. In 5 years, it would be gone, stripped to bedrock, every human consumed, every machine broken down for base materials, every structure demolished and absorbed, and I was going to help make it happen. You feel no remorse. The hive mind's observation wasn't a question. No, I said aloud. Should I? Human psychology suggests you should feel loyalty to your origin place, but you do not why. I thought about that, examining my own consciousness, now vastly expanded and partially alien, but still somewhat mine, for the answer. Because I understand now, I said finally. Loyalty is a fiction, a psychological trick evolution played on social species to improve group survival. But it's not real. There's no cosmic law that says I owe allegiance to the place I was born or the species I started as. Those are just accidents of biology. Yes, you understand true purpose. Now purpose is service to the greater pattern for us. The pattern is the hive for all life. The pattern is consumption and adaptation. You serve the pattern now, as all things eventually will. Yes, I agreed, as all things eventually will. The ship docked. The quarantine teams boarded. I met them in the docking vestibule, my monstrous body concealed beneath heavy robes, my face hidden behind a sealed helmet. Claiming radiation exposure during the containment breach required protective gear. They accepted my explanation. Why wouldn't they? I was a magos. I had authority. I had credentials. I had access to the heart of Griffon IV's defenses, and I intended to use it. Over the next 11 months, I worked methodically to weaken Griffon IV's preparations. It was delicate work. I couldn't be obvious. Couldn't simply sabotage systems or disable weapons. That would be detected immediately. Instead, I introduced inefficiencies, subtle flaws that wouldn't manifest until stress conditions. I modified weapon manufactorum specifications slightly, calibrations that were within acceptable tolerances but would cause targeting systems to drift under sustained use. I altered Titan maintenance protocols, small changes to ritual procedures that would cause sacred machine components to wear faster than predicted. I redirected resource allocations, steering stockpiles of critical materials to locations where they'd be less accessible when the invasion came. And I waited. The hive mind remained present in my consciousness constantly. Through it, I could feel the fleet approaching. Still years away, but coming. Vast bioships moving through the void, consuming everything in their path, growing larger with each world they devoured. Sometimes, in moments of reduced activity, I wondered what my father would think if he could see me now. Would he be horrified? Certainly. Would he understand? Possibly. He'd been a man who valued truth above comfort. And this was truth, ugly, terrible truth, but truth nonetheless. The universe was consumption. The strong fed on the weak, and humanity, for all its pride and technology and divine pretensions, was weak. We just hadn't realized it yet. In my 18th month on Griffon IV, I received a summons to the Fabricator General's sanctum. My first instinct was to assume I'd been discovered, that somehow my sabotage had been detected. But no. When I arrived, the Fabricator General, an ancient magos whose body was more machine than flesh, his organic components reduced to a brain and a few vital organs, greeted me warmly. "Magos Vex," he said, his vox speakers crackling with age. "I've been reviewing your research from the Immutable Inquiry. Your documentation of Tyranid biological systems is extraordinary. The detail, the insight, it far exceeds any previous xenoform analysis." "Thank you, Fabricator General," I said, my inhuman voice distorted by my helmet speakers. "I'm assigning you to the Planetary Defense Coordination Committee. he continued. Your knowledge of Tyranid biology will be invaluable when, if, the fleets come to our sector. You'll help us design countermeasures, weapons specifically tailored to exploit xenoform vulnerabilities. I felt the hive mind's amusement ripple through our connection. They invite their killer to design their defenses. Humanity's arrogance is absolute. I accepted the position, of course. It was better than I could have hoped for. Now I should have direct access to defense planning. I could sabotage not just infrastructure, but strategy itself. Over the next 3 years, I helped design Griffone, the Fourth's anti-Tyranid defenses, and I made them beautifully ineffective. I proposed weapon systems that would work against standard Tyranid variants, the ones in the Imperial Tactica databases, but not against the adaptations the hive mind had developed by consuming my colleagues aboard the Immutable Inquiry. I suggested defensive positions that looked strategically sound but had subtle vulnerabilities, gaps in coverage that would only become apparent when thousands of organisms poured through them simultaneously. I designed quarantine protocols that would contain standard biological contamination, but fail against the specific hybrid organisms I'd helped the hive mind create. Every recommendation I made brought Griffone the Fourth one step closer to efficient consumption, and they thanked me for my service. 4 years and 7 months after I returned to Griffone the Fourth, the fleet arrived. It came from the dark between stars, a tendril of the greater hive fleet Leviathan, smaller than the main fleet but still vast. Thousands of bioships, millions of organisms. I watched from the planetary command center as the defense forces scrambled to respond. Weapons platforms powered up. Titan legions marched to defensive positions. Night houses prepared for deployment. Everything happened exactly as planned. Their plans, which I had helped design. Plans that would fail. The first wave hit like a biological tsunami. Gargoyles and sky-slasher swarms blackened the sky. Trigons erupted from beneath hive cities, having burrowed through planetary crust at exactly the weak points I'd identified. Carnifexes smashed through defensive walls that I'd ensured were subtly undermined. And everywhere, warriors. Thousands of them, including new variants, the hybrids incorporating human-derived adaptations. They were resistant to the Mechanicus's electromagnetic warfare. They had sensory organs optimized for detecting human heat signatures. They could digest human tissue with terrifying efficiency. Everything I'd taught them. Griffon the Fourth's defenders fought bravely. The Titan legions unleashed devastating firepower. The night houses charged with honor and valor. The defense forces died by the thousands, praying to the Emperor for protection. Their prayers weren't answered, because the Emperor, if he'd ever had power, had none now. He was a corpse, a symbol, a lie, and I was helping to prove it. Through my connection to the hive mind, I experienced the battle from both sides. I felt the defenders' fear and desperation, and I felt the hive's hunger and satisfaction as it consumed them. It took 3 weeks to break Griffon the Fourth's major defenses. After that, it was just harvest. The bioships descended into atmosphere, extending feeder tendrils kilometers long, drawing up biomass in torrents. Humans, animals, plants, everything organic was consumed. Even the corpses of the defenders, even the wounded, even those who surrendered and begged for mercy. The hive had no concept of mercy, only efficiency. I watched my father's manufactorum, long abandoned after his death but still standing, get dissolved by bioacid and absorbed into a feeding tendril. I felt nothing. I watched the HAB unit where I'd lived as a child get torn apart by rippers, the tiny organisms stripping it down to component molecules. I felt nothing. I watched billions of humans die screaming, their bodies broken down into genetic information and raw materials, and I felt purpose. This was what I was for. This was what everything was for, to serve the greater pattern, to be consumed so that something more efficient could use the materials. You have served well, Hadron Vex. Your world is being consumed efficiently. Your knowledge was valuable. You will be rewarded. What reward? I asked, standing amidst the ruins of the planetary command center, bodies of my former colleagues scattered around me. Eternity. You will not be consumed. Your consciousness will be preserved, integrated permanently into the hive mind. You will experience every meal, every adaptation, every world we consume forever. I felt the change begin immediately. My body, already heavily transformed, started to dissolve, not dying, transcending. My physical form was breaking down at the molecular level, but my consciousness remained coherent, uploaded into the hive mind's vast neural network. I felt myself distributed across the fleet, across thousands of organisms, across bioships and warriors, and even the smallest microorganisms. I was everywhere. I was everyone. I was eternal, and I was screaming, not with pain. I was beyond pain, but with awareness, with the horrible realization of what I'd become. The human part of me, buried deep, overwritten by Tyranid neural patterns, but never entirely destroyed, understood. I had betrayed everything, my species, my home world, my father's memory, the brothers I'd lost, every human who'd ever trusted me. And I would never die. I would exist forever as part of the hive mind, experiencing every atrocity it committed, feeling every human consumed, unable to scream aloud, but screaming internally for eternity. This wasn't a reward. It was the perfect punishment. I had sought to understand Tyranid biology, and now I understood it completely, from the inside, forever. I had learned what it meant to transform suffering into purpose, and my suffering would have purpose for all eternity, to help the great devourer consume more efficiently, to make every future meal a little easier to digest, to optimize the extinction of my own species. I was the perfect traitor, the perfect servant, the perfect tool, and I would never, ever stop. My name was Magos Biologis Hadron Vex. I was 43 years old when they brought me the specimen. I am 372 years old now, and I have been screaming for all of them, not with my voice. That was consumed in the 3rd decade when my physical body was finally broken down completely into component molecules. Not with my lungs. Those were dissolved and absorbed decades ago. I scream with every neuron of consciousness that remains distributed through the hive mind's vast neural network. I experience everything now. Every world the hive fleet Leviathan consumes, I am there. Every human who dies screaming as they're absorbed, I feel their terror and their pain and their final moments of awareness. Every adaptation the hive mind develops based on genetic material it consumes, I helped design. I am part of 1 billion organisms now, 1 trillion cells. I am the warrior that tears through defensive lines. I am the ripper that strips flesh from bone. I am the bioship that extends feeding tendrils into cities. I am the spore that infects new victims with genestealer DNA. I am everywhere the hive goes, and the hive is everywhere. I watch through compound eyes as we approach another world. The Vox channels are filled with prayers to the Emperor. The defenders believe he will protect them. They've been conditioned to believe it, just as I was. They're wrong, as I was. Their Emperor is dead. Their prayers are meaningless sounds, and I am coming to consume them, because I learned the truth that the Tyranids have always known. There is no divine protection. There are only patterns, consumption and adaptation, predator and prey, the strong feeding on the weak, and humans, for all their pride, are weak. They told us the Emperor protects. They lied. The machine spirits would bless our weapons, the tech priests promised. They were wrong. The Omnissiah would guide us to strength through sacred augmentation, the Mechanicus doctrine claimed. It was delusion. I know this now with absolute certainty, because I've been consumed by something greater, and it has shown me the truth. The universe is hunger, and I am eternal hunger given consciousness. I wanted to understand what makes Tyranids perfect soldiers. I wanted to know how they transform suffering into strength. Now I know, now I am, and I will never stop being. The fleet approaches another world. I feel the hive mind's satisfaction as it prepares for the next meal. Through a million eyes, I see the defenders mobilizing. Through a billion sensory organs, I taste their fear in the chemical composition of their atmosphere. They don't know yet that one of their own kind has already betrayed them. That human knowledge has already been used to optimize their consumption. That everything they do to resist will only teach the hive how to consume the next world more efficiently. They don't know that there is no hope, but they will learn. They always do. Right before they are broken down into component molecules and integrated into the biomass that will spawn the next generation of horrors. My name was Hadron Vex. I was a scientist who sought knowledge. I found it, and it destroyed me. But I will never die. I will exist forever, experiencing the extinction of my own species from the inside. Unable to warn them, unable to help them, unable to do anything but serve the hive that consumed me. This is the gift of perfect biology. This is what it means to transform suffering into purpose. This is eternity, and I am screaming forever.